Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar Podcast. Excited for today's episode. We are talking to the founder of CEO Sales Strategies. And what he does is he helps independent business professionals predictably grow their revenue by implementing a predictable, reliable, measurable, math-based model for sales revenue growth, which helps businesses overcome the uncertainty of fluctuating sales. Man, I definitely know what that means, fluctuating sales. So I'm excited to be rocking out today with Doug C. Brown. Hey, Doug, you ready to rock?
Hey, Tim, thanks so much. I'm so grateful for being here today.
Awesome. So we always start off on a good note. Tell me a story of success in your business that we can be inspired by.
Whoa. So one recent or does it matter? Does it
Doesn't
matter?
matter. Something awesome.
Actually, this one was recent. So a lot of times we help people find their what we call their right fit buyer because they think they understand their buying market, but they don't. So we just recently helped a consultant, hone in on that thing, and he added $245,000 in new revenue in 6 weeks. So he grew from 700,000 to 945,000 in 6 weeks. So we felt that was a good win.
Yeah, it's a very good win. Absolutely. Well, now I always pair this together because, sometimes things don't go as planned as well as
Sure.
entrepreneurs. And I'm wondering, can you share with us something that didn't go super well in the bad note?
Oh yeah, man. There's like 5,000 of those in my life over the last 50 years of doing this. I would say one recently. We originally went out and built a SaaS product. We built a meaningful, proactive, and relevant automated follow-up system for people because follow-up is one of those things that you can easy get an easy bump 5 to 20% in revenue if you just follow up consistently. So we're like, we'll build it. And we made the classic mistake of not building a prototype and pre-selling it prior to, and ended up spending like $500,000 building this thing and probably could have done it for about 280,000, 300,000.
Wow.
So yeah, so we lost some money, and every time we drive by something and go, geez, maybe we stop at this place. And it's like, well, we just spent the money. So, stuff like that happens. One of the things I've learned in business, Tim, is it always takes you, longer than you figure it's going to, and it usually costs you more than you figure. So we made a mistake, and we don't cry about it. We just rock on, as you said in the beginning, and you just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think that that's necessarily the way that people think about things generally, is they think that a failure is like the end of the world. And like, hey, if that business owner has ever had a failure, it means they're a bad business owner, right?
Right, right. No, it's here's the thing, like, we're taught growing up, most of us, depending on our culture, some extremely like I have some friends, I used to study martial arts, and like in the Asian culture, it's like if you didn't get an A+, if you got an A-, that was shame, right? That type of thing.
Mm,
Or a B, forget it, man. You're shaming the family. I didn't grow up that tight on it, but most of us grown up, like if you don't make something happen and you fail at it, then it's a failure
yeah.
versus, it's a learning experience to be learning from. And then when we learn from it, we don't make the mistake again. That's called wisdom, by the way, down the line, right? Um, so entrepreneurs, please expect that you're going to make mistakes and fail. It's just part of the journey. And is it fun? No, but it is part of the journey. And quite frankly, if you're not failing at something, you're probably living below your capacity of being able to earn more money.
Yeah, because I mean, we really learn more from those failures than we do from the successes, right? So, you know,
Yeah,
fail
yeah,
forward.
yeah. Yeah, and we do this in our personal lives all the time, and it hurts, and then we recover from it, but we don't think about it as much. But in the business context, we tend to really make it stick. And there's a difference between failing and being a failure, right?
Yeah.
And so we got to be careful of the labels that we self stick to our own self, because if we failed at something, all right, well, you know what? We failed at a lot of things. I don't know. Tim, you ever asked someone out and they said no, right? I mean, probably
Really.
not you, but me hundreds of times, right? So
Yeah.
but my line got a little bit better, and I understood what what ladies wanted a little bit more by failing and then asking people, hey, where did I fail? right? But I didn't consider myself a failure. And if I did, I wouldn't have two children, right? Because I never would have been able to take that dating relationship to the marital relationship to the children. So, in business, we should look at things the same exact way. You're going to make things happen. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. You always want them to work, of course, but they're not always going to work. And when you have a failure or if you failed, then pick yourself up off the ground. By the way, folks, it's the recovery time that is the most important.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
fail, get back right up. As I said in the old days, get back right up on the horse, because you will be thrown off a horse if you ride it enough.
Yeah.
And that's just part of being a rider on a horse. And you will fail in business if you are in business. And that's just part of it. Just when you fail, pick yourself up, ask the question, what did I learn here? And what can I do differently? And what do I need to do to move forward?
Yeah. Right on. So when so I think this is probably pretty normal that if someone's good at what they do, and maybe they're sort of thinking, oh, well, I'm working for a company, the boss is taking all that money. I'm great at what I do. I can just start my own business and cut out the middleman, right? And I can just, because I'm so good at what I do, that's all I'll need to know in order to be able to sell my services to other people.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily work out the way the way you'd like it to. And I'm wondering, like, what's your thoughts on gathering fans, on getting people to be interested in what you do?
So, so I hear two different questions. So is the question, what do I personally do to get people to be fans of my business? Or if I was going to come out of that position where I believe I'm an expert and I'm being undervalued, underpaid, and I'm coming out of a company, what should I pay attention to so that they buy from me?
I would like to know, okay, so let's start first with your personal story. So when you first became, a business owner,
Yeah.
did you actually think that? Or did you already kind of know that you needed to be good at sales? Like where did that come from?
So I actually had the fortunate experience of starting working at the age of 3 for my dad. So my
Oh,
my, my dad had a business, electric machinery industrial repair company, and all us boys, there were 4 of us. Um, we all started working very young. I started sweeping floors at 3, and got paid 25 cents a week, and I loved it. It was awesome because the grown-ups would go to this place called the Stagecoach Cafe or something like that. And they would take me and they'd sit me up on the bar stool. They'd have a beer and I'd have I think it was a lime Ricky or something like that back then. Um, and my mother was not happy with my father when he brought me into the bar for the, 3 years old. But we used to go for have lunch and I just loved hanging out and listening to the stories. But by age 5.5, we were actually being taught how to sell.
wow.
Right. So I was fortunate. It was a family owned business, 14 employees. And, the family was around and I was writing orders. I was like taking parts and figuring out how much we were going to sell them for. And I was getting 25 cents an hour at that time, Tim. So, $10 a week. Not bad for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, right? Back then. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking 1967, back then. God, I'm getting old. But back then that would buy you a lot. So but what happened was I was selling parts and we were buying them for like $10 and selling them for 20. Right. And so I remember one day I sold 8 of these same, they were like motor switches and things like that. And I was like, 8 times 10 is $80 that I just made for the company.
Wow.
And I'm making $10 a week. And I did this in one day, but I could make 8 times what I'm making if I could do, and my brain just started processing the leverage of it all.
Yeah.
And I also was very fortunate because, my grandparents actually did the books. So they would sit down and they break it down and say, hey, we sold this for $10, but this part goes to operations. This part goes to here. This part goes to, and this is what the company keeps. Right. And it was a certain smaller percentage for sure.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's how I learned that power of leverage. So when I first went out, my first real job on my own, my first real business was a lawn mowing business. And I was underage, so I couldn't get the lawn mowing. And so I approached my brothers who were, 5, 6, and 9 years older than I am. And I said, hey, would you guys go take paper routes? I'll run it and I'll pay you a percentage. And so then I hired kids from the neighborhood to actually deliver the papers. And I played like
Wow.
sales manager in the middle. So, that's kind of how it started working for me. Now, here's the thing. Some days the kids who were going to deliver the paper route didn't show up. You know what I mean? So you have challenges no matter what business. So that's how it worked for me.
Yeah.
And then just one business after another, you and I both were in the music business. I had bands and, promotion, and I was a DJ for a long time, small businesses when I was growing up. And then, we had a Christmas tree retailing business, a fisheries business. We just started getting into them. And every single time I got into something, I learned something. I made a mistake. I learned that boats are very expensive, especially commercial boats. And you don't make a lot of money as a commercial, in commercial fishery, because the majority goes back into the boat for
Yeah.
maintenance and for, supplies. So, you just keep moving forward. That's what I've learned. And then eventually I hit my first, like, woo, I really made a ton of money here as a 7-figure business, very high profit, netting down, darn close to, $750,000 at a very young age at that point. And then that's when I started going, okay, I can do this and I can help other people do this. And so kind of led into where I am today. So that's the first part.
Wow.
Yeah. And the second part, if somebody's going to be launching off, let's say they're in, and by the way, I did that, right? Maybe you and I were talking earlier and I said, hey, for a period of time, I went back into the corporation world, right? Um, and I went into selling and I was doing extremely well. I was the number one rep out of 315 people in the company, all the reps. And I just felt like I was in this invisible prison, paid
Mm.
prison, I used to call it. And I decided to jump out of that and start a telecommunications consulting and auditing company. And, you know, here's what I want people to know. There's the business of running a business, and then there's the business of the business that you're an expert in.
Mm.
And what most people, when they pop out of a job or come out of a position, they're jumping out of the expertise position that they're in, and they think, that's going to translate into the business of running a business.
Yeah.
And that's where they make the mistake.
I agree, 100%. Yeah, and that's well, one of the reasons why I started the podcast in the first place. I found that there was a lot more of, running the business than just doing the thing that I'm good at, which is why I started the business in the first place. It ended up being that I was spending probably less than 20% doing that. And everything else was taken up all the time, right? And I don't think
Right.
everybody gets that when they first get started. And
No, because when we're in an environment that human resources is already covered, operations is covered,
yeah,
finance is covered, legal is covered, compliance is covered. All of these things are covered, and we're doing one part, let's say, out of 10 or 12 or 14 parts of the business, and we're really, really good at it.
yeah,
Then when we come out, we now have the other 12 or 13 parts that we weren't anticipating. And so we end up getting sucked into that component of it. Um, and we don't really understand it. So we're not set up for it. So now we're learning the business of the business. And here, the thing is the business only cares about us feeding it.
yeah,
It's like a newborn child, right? Love me, feed me, bathe me, clean me,
yeah.
whatever. And I'll give you back some joy and love, especially if you're taking care of me. Now, if you don't do that, I'm going to scream my head off and all night long, right? I'll be up and you will get no sleep. You will be cranky. You will have a miserable day, right? Because any of us who have ever had a child can relate, to being up all night,
Hmm.
I'll get sick and I don't care if you have to go to work for 3 or 4 days. It doesn't matter. I'm going to throw up on you anyways. And that's just the way the business runs. So if people don't understand the business of the business, the number one thing that they really must understand is that what business they're in. And
Yeah.
that is the business of business acquisition. They've got to be in the business of marketing and selling. It's got to be get a lead, close a lead. That's the only thing the business cares about because money in equal plus money out equals profit, break even, or loss. It's that
Yeah.
simple.
Well, okay. And so, I mean, you have a really rich history with that. I mean, you learned very early on how to how to sell, really, when it comes down to it. Not everybody necessarily learns that when they're growing up. I'm wondering though, like, do you think that that's something that anybody can learn, or do
Oh,
you think
yes.
that that's something that you do? Okay.
Oh, yeah, without question. And I know this because I've taken people, I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of people who had, well, it is thousands of people who had no experience whatsoever in selling, right? But there was a really great book titled To Sell as Human. Mr. Daniel Pink wrote the book.
Yep. Yeah.
And if you want to know the best salespeople in the world, naturally, they're children.
Yeah.
They will sell anything
Yeah.
because they know they want it. Now, they're the most natural salespeople. I would also argue that they're not necessarily the most um, truthful salespeople, right? Right? They don't always play win-win. Let me put it that way, right? Like if you
Yeah.
can't get it from mom, you go to dad. If you can't get it from dad, you might go to, your grandfather or your grandma, right?
Hmm.
So, but they're persistent, right?
Yeah.
In their pursuit, but they know they want something and they will go and ask questions about how to get it.
Yeah.
And selling is nothing more than usually two people, maybe more, could be ourselves,
Yeah.
that we're trying to solve a problem, we're trying to get an opportunity, or we're trying to get a goal. And the
Wow.
other person is doing that. And then we, as the salesperson, are helping them get that through what we can offer. And we do this through dialogue, communication, and come to a mutual agreement that it works for them and it works for us. And that's the best sale in the world.
Yeah.
Really, that's the essence of selling. And so many people, they complicate the heck out of this, Tim, because they're like, well, they'll listen to sales trainers and they'll say, well, use this alternate choice close or use this, manipulative, whatever. And you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
You know, children don't know those things,
Yep. And they get what they want.
right? My gosh, how many times have I done things for my two girls that when even now as they're in their 20s, um, but they just know how to, right? And when they were younger, it was like, you want to do these things for your children because you want your children to have a better life than you have. So, they're selling on that thing. My youngest daughter was highly into gymnastics. Well, folks, those of you who've been in gymnastics, you know what it costs, right? But I mean, she was doing it competitively, and we were flying her all around the United States and different things, and they just naturally sell,
Yeah.
right? And so we as human beings all have this in us. We've been conditioned to have some of it taken out of us by like we don't like rejection, right?
Hmm.
We don't want to look foolish. We don't want to look like we don't know what we're talking about. Well, most of that is preparation. Um, when you're making offers to someone, there's going to be some rejection, no matter what you're doing. I mean, I you could, I know somebody who literally had the Starbucks model 12 years before Starbucks went into business and they failed.
Wow.
They had the exact same model and they tried to start it on the East Coast and it just failed. And so you're going to have those things, but when you're selling, you will hear no, you will hear maybes, all of that stuff. but that's just the psychological game, which can be also taught, Tim.
I think so too. No, I think you're right. And I mean, that is really deep though. That kids naturally have the selling thing, down pat. And then eventually it gets kind of worked out of us for whatever reason. I think a lot of it might have to do with uh, just getting scammed, really. At some point you sort of have some situation where it's not a win-win, and maybe it is your kids.
Right.
Uh, but you sort of think, okay, well, I'll never do that, and then you sort of just quit, or you don't want to do it, or you sort of hold back on. But really, when it comes down to it, I think that people are buying all the time. And like you said earlier, I mean, you're just basically lining up something that someone wants with something that you have. And that's just
Right.
real a basic way to look at it. So as long as you have something that they want, then it's just a matter of figuring out how to do that, how to make that transaction, right?
Yeah. I mean, and you can see it like, I mean, take something as basic as a cell phone, right?
Hmm.
I mean, Apple don't sue me, but is an iPhone really worth that kind of money? Right?
I wonder
Yeah.
about that.
Is a Tesla truck really worth that kind of money or whatever they call those things?
Yeah.
Right? Is a Lamborghini worth that kind of money? Well, yeah, to some people because that's what they want,
Hmm.
right? And so anything is going to be purchased as long as someone values that which is being offered.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when we find what somebody wants, if we can convey the value they're looking for, then it makes sense. You know, Harvard University is not known as the least expensive educational institution in the world, right? It's known as one of the more costly ones.
Yeah.
MIT, right? They carry a reputation. Some people go to those schools just to say, I went there,
Yeah.
right? So, Tim, you and I in the music business, I ended up in Berklee College of Music, right? For one semester. Now, I have degrees in nuclear medicine, biology, business, and others. And when people look at my LinkedIn profile, the number one thing they asked me a question about was, how was Berklee College of Music?
Well,
I'm like, I went there one semester, right? What about the 3 degrees I have, right? But they value the Berklee College of Music. And
uh,
that's so the conversational value and the sale that's going on should be about what they're looking for. And so many people, when they're trying to sell, are talking about what they want to sell versus what the actual end recipient is actually looking for and values. So they're
mhm.
trying to displace the seller is trying to displace their values onto the seller, and two frames collide at that point. When those two frames collide, you're going to get objections. You're going to get
Well,
stalls. You're going to get these things that just don't work out on the back end because it isn't what they're looking for. It's what the seller's looking for, not the recipient or the buyer. So we have to align in through our communication those 2 points. And the more they see the value and the less they see fear or feel fear, the more their buying confidence goes up. The more their buying confidence goes up, the more they will buy.
yeah. Wow. When I think about sales strategies, uh,
Yes.
and I would sort of generalize on what someone would think would be the best sales strategy, I think they would probably say lower the price. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
That's it, depending on the market that you're wanting to serve, that could be perceived as high value. Most human beings are wired this way. They're not looking for the lowest price.
Hmm.
They're looking for a price point that's in alignment with the value they perceive it to be.
Wow. Yeah.
And you can see this because, well, my wife actually is from Poland originally. So when we were courting, I would fly to Poland. And uh, I would fly to London first because it was easier to go to London and then find a flight to where she lived. And I would take day flights and night flights to London. And every single time, now this is a 6-hour flight, just like if we were flying to California. Every single time, first class was full.
Wow.
Okay. So if I was paying, say, $600 for a ticket, and they're paying $4,000 or $5,000 for a ticket, right? And they are, let's say, 70 feet in front of me. They do get a little better meal, right? But the meal, on transatlantic flights they're actually pretty good regardless. They get to lie down in the seat. And I guess overnight there's some value in that. You could sleep a little. But it's a 6-hour flight. And so is it worth $3,400 or more to some people?
Yeah.
Yes, because it's full, right? Now, for some people, they can justify, and we all do this in a sale. We all look at a business return on investment, personal return on investment. The business return on investment is, hey, I have a meeting the next day. I won't be tired. I can sell more or do the deal because I'm more alert.
Yeah.
Right? The personal return on investment could be, I won't feel like, crap the next day when I get off this plane because of the time shift. Or, I can say to my friends or to my client, yes, I fly first class. So it elevates me in status, right? So there's different triggers that people look at to determine the value. And that's no matter what the price is, they will look at that conveyance of value. Now, if they can't see the value in it, they will always revert back to lowest price.
Yes.
Okay?
There's a hint, right?
Right. And so they will go to convenience and price as the two lowest values in the value set. Now, convenience, because of the pandemic, because of online, because of all this stuff, has actually creeped up in the hierarchy of how people perceive value, right? We shop at Amazon or Walmart or wherever, online stores because we can get it the next day. Right. And so our local, let's say I wanted to buy something at Home Depot or Lowe's and I can't get it for 5 days from there, but I can go up on, let's say, one of the sites up on the web and order and have it there tomorrow. Well, you know what? I'm going to pay a little more to have it there tomorrow because that's the value. Right. So convenience actually has moved up in the value ladder, but price is never. If you're constantly talking about price, and you're selling, the first question you should be asking yourself is, where is this person not seeing the value?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's great because that is a clue, right? If someone's saying it's too expensive, that doesn't mean that your price is too high. It means that the value that they're seeing for the price that you're quoting is not in line. And so you need to get better, I think, at showing that value, right?
We do. And the way we figure that out is understand who the ideal right fit buyer is and what they want, need, fear, desire, what they're looking for in the business return on investment, what they're looking for the personal return on investment, tangible and intangible, and understand that audience. Like, who does a masterful job at this in the music business is Taylor Swift.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Masterful. And I had when my daughters were maybe 5 and 6, they're 20, 25 now. When they were that age, I took them to a Taylor Swift concert. And when I walked in, by the way, I was probably one of 18 gentlemen in the whole audience of 40,000 people there, right?
Yeah.
I remember looking over and I'm like, oh, there's a guy over there. Hi, how are you? And I'm like waving across the arena. But what I watched was how she was collecting social media information real time at the event and how she was providing value to the audience at the event, and how these young ladies and these middle-aged ladies were being conveyed value from Taylor in her organization at that point. Genius. I was like, this was worth paying whatever we paid. It's not the ticket price that they pay today because she wasn't as known back then. But I mean, some people are paying like $10,000 or whatever to go see Taylor Swift, right? So why do they do that? It's the same reason they pay for Disney. Some people save for years to go on a 1 week or 2 week Disney vacation, and they tell everybody about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I stayed at the Dolphin Hotel or whatever's down there in Disney, right? So why do people do that? Because other people would look at it and they're like, well, the Hilton wasn't okay, So it's a different buyer. It's what they value differently. And you're absolutely right. If they don't see it, they'll drop down in price because that's all they've got left to be able to feel like they have buying confidence in the situation because there's such high fear or discomfort on the other end. If we look at it like, what was that thing when we were kids? Seesaw? Like we used to get on Seesaw. You put one person on one side, the other, they go up, down, up, down. Well, if we put buying confidence on one side of the seesaw and fear on the other side of the seesaw, and fear is super high or super heavy,
Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah.
Then what happens is it's kind of like that really, like you're 6, 7 years old with your friend, and then a 14-year-old comes by and sits on the other side of the seesaw and just keeps you up in the air, and you're like dangling around up in the air. You're in fear, when you're a little kid like that. So there's a little buying confidence that you're not going to fall off that seesaw and hurt yourself, right? Buyers feel the same way. So what we want to do is we want to have the buying confidence be really super high. And that's how you get the value matchup that we're talking about. And that's what promotes that buying confidence.
Wow. Okay. So what kinds of tools or instruments do you use in your business to get success?
Tools from technology or I mean, here's the thing about technology. I came from a tech business, telecommunications, all that stuff originally. The one thing I learned about technology in our businesses is to keep it as simple as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And use technology that if it breaks, you can also accommodate it with something else. So always have backups to your technology. Like, we're using a web software here, right? We do the same thing. We use Zoom. We have another service called Riverside that we use for podcasts as well, or meetings. We also have something called Meetin, right? And we have Google. We have 4 of them because one of them is going to burp somewhere or just not work. Like Zoom just had a massive problem the other day, right? And so we always keep it simple, and we always, keep it redundant, if you will, always having a backup in the process. So, we use, Google and Microsoft, right? And we even have an Apple computer that if it all fails, that we can go back to that. But what we don't try to do is do so much that's so technically complex that if something breaks on it, then we have a challenge, right? Because if, let's say this thing was just glitching on our conversation, which it's not, but let's say it was, and just glitching, and every 4th word was being pulled out of our conversation. We don't want that, right? And so we want to have, so that's what we do. We just try to keep it simple, and I'm constantly ripping it down to more simplistic. With that being said, we are now using a lot of AI and redundant AI processes, because what used to take us hours now can be done in moments.
Yeah.
Like I'll create outlines of conversations like we're having now, and it'll do it in 30 seconds. And we build out, AI processes that will give us the output of information that we're looking for. We utilize AI technologies to create videos. We use AI technologies to do a lot of stuff that is just repetitive, redundant, or frankly, you just don't want to do it. It can do it in moments for you, right? So that makes our lives a lot easier. So that's kind of part of the technology. We built our own, follow-up software that, we talked about in the beginning. So we utilize that. We have a CRM in that. We utilize that, but we also have a backup CRM just in case something happens to one of those.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I come from a tech world as well. And yes, backups are so funny how people will rely so heavily on technology. And sometimes it just doesn't necessarily work the way you want it to. But on the other hand, it sounds like you've kind of jumped on the AI bandwagon, which I have as well.
Yeah.
And I think that having fear towards that stuff is, you might get left in the dust, especially with this particular one, because I think I haven't seen a tool make that much difference in my business
All
ever, right? Since I started using the AI, especially recently, right?
right. In most businesses, you will be left compromised to your competition if you don't embrace AI.
Yeah.
It's just because it's rapidly developed and it's going to continue to be.
Yeah.
And so, I remember, when the dial-up internet came in and then DSL came in, right?
I do too.
And, so when DSL, for folks, those of you who don't know what we're talking about, you used to have to dial up a number. It would go over these copper wires and it would sound like,
Yeah.
right? The modem sound. And then it went to high-speed access and, it was like 144 kilobytes or, or no, 144 megabytes, right? I believe it was. And then that was 256, you know, megabytes, I believe. And when DSL came in, you could download a picture, like a full picture in under a minute. It was like, wow, that was awesome. And I laugh sometimes because, even my my kids, they can't remember times like that because that never happened in their lifetime. But the point being is I told people way back then when we were selling in corporate environment back then, this technology is going to change sales forever.
Hmm.
And they all said, "You're crazy." And I said, "No, think about this. With a couple of clicks and a few keywords, I can go find information that people are asking us as the sales channel, as the experts. They're trying to get the information from us, but now they're going to know more about this than we will in time. And so now our selling has to change because it's not like you can go into the car dealer anymore and they can hide all of this stuff that they used to when I was growing up, right? You never knew what the paid for the car, what the accident report was on the car, or any of that stuff. And now, hell, geez, Tim, I can go to the car. In fact, I did. We bought a car, and I asked the person, hey, if we went from this SEL package to this next level, the heating and cooling seats, they in the front and the back.
Yeah.
And the sales rep said, I have no idea. And I'm like, no, no, no. I just read it online. This is what the package comes, and it comes in these three trimming interiors, right? These colors. And so, see, I have the advantage at that point because I have
Yeah.
the information, right? So that's what technology and AI is going to do again. It's
Agree.
already happening.
Agree. Yeah, yeah. The buyer is becoming more and more aware of what's going on, right? This
Yes,
is this is
yes.
awesome. All right. I'd love to talk about all this. I could talk forever, but we're running out of time. So it's time for your guest solo. So tell me what's exciting in your business right now, Doug.
I've gone through a transit. It's funny as I get a little older now. I just turned. I say 13 because at 50 I started counting again. So, you know, so I'm 63, I guess, by chronological years, but I'm only 13. And it's funny because my daughters are in their 20s. And they'll come back from like karate class and they'll be like, "Man, I'm really tired." I'm like, "That's because you're old. Like I'm."
Yeah.
If you were 13, you wouldn't be old, right? So, and they're like, "Shut up, Dad." But anyways, the what's really exciting for me is, I used to all be about like building big companies and corporate environments and going out and, helping big companies and just in companies of any size, really, but all the way up to like, Intuit, Procter and Gamble, and those to, you know, um, companies where I could help add, tens of millions of dollars.
Hmm.
And it was exciting. And then one day I woke up and I was like, you know what? I don't like what's going on in the world today. The inflation that's going on, it's kicking up, and people are just getting, I mean, if you're working for an hourly wage and you get a 3% increase in raise of life pay or 4%, but inflation's going up by 10 or 12 or 15, you're
Yep.
losing 6, 7, 8% every year, right? And it's like, I want to help people, and so how can I do that? Well, I can teach them how to make a six-figure income or add another six-figure income to their current six-figure income, at least another six figures, through helping them in what we're talking about today, Tim, in business acquisition, how to sell and how to do it ethically and, how to have moral obligations so you do the win-win play, right?
Hmm.
And so that's where we're swinging our whole business to right now. We still help companies, with, helping their sales teams grow. Occasionally we'll even build in, back end sales teams for companies and train those companies and train the teams, things like that. But we're swinging our business over to the independent business professional.
Wow.
And that's what's exciting me. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice or not, but it really does excite me because here's the sad part. People are trying to retire today. They run out of money between 8 and 12 years if they liquidated everything.
Wow.
It's crazy. Like, somebody who retires out at 65 years old could be out of money by the time they're 74. And hello, they're going to live longer than that, most people. So if I can help somebody add another six figures in their retirement to their bottom line, just by selling for other people or building a business like you're teaching people to do, Tim, and help them understand what the business is, a business acquisition, and how to do that. To me, that's the difference between them being able to take their grandkids or great grandkids on a European trip, or not running out of money, or having enough funding so that they can do really fun things with the rest of their life. Because who the heck wants to get to a place and not have that kind of money to sit around and try to figure out, hey, do we cut calories just so we can survive? That's crazy. So that's really where I'm going with that. And then, obviously I'll help other companies and things like that as well. But that's my passion at this point.
Wow. I love that, Doug. And what I love so much about today, about this time, is that I feel like it is accessible for just about anybody to be able to make that transition. And, because I do think that we're at a place where we need to take more responsibility for our futures rather than assuming that whatever, I don't know, the government's going to take care of us, I guess,
No, no,
right?
no, no. No, no, no. That part has been a long-standing, what I call the great myth, right?
Hmm.
Governments only survive and thrive for their own purposes.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a history professor said that to me when I was 22 in college. And I was like, wow, really? And I do agree he's right. So yeah, that's are you too old to learn new tricks? No, I mean, I have people that are in their late 80s that have, we've taught to do this. I have people who are in their, young teenage years learning how to do this. So it's not an age restriction thing. In fact, the your age can actually be a huge benefit depending on what you decide you're going to sell.
Agree, agree. So what's the process look like for someone who might want to work with you?
So I'd love to invite people to our master classes to kind of get to know us a little more. We have one on how to create predictable revenue. That is, people can go to ceosalesstrategies.com/PRM, predictable, reliable, measurable revenue, right?
Okay.
So ceosalesstrategies.com/PRM. These are free master classes. They're 90 minutes.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
then we offer something on the back end. If they want to invest in it, they can. If they don't, then that's their right too. We also do one called www.workethome.com/stop the leak. And the reason we put it that way is because this one is on the number one sales leak that causes people to lose 5 to 20% a year. And so we did specifically on that. Those are the best ways if they want to catch me personally. Doug at ceoclstrategies.com or Doug Brown 123. That's my LinkedIn. Or just Google me at Doug C. Brown revenue growth, and I'll be probably on the first 8 to 10 pages.
That's awesome. So really people can get an opportunity to just learn a little bit more about how you work, right? And
Yeah.
get something out of one of your master classes before they're, to actually help them to see if they want to work with you too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and if they want to reach out direct, we just schedule a time to talk. I don't understand sometimes, Tim, people, they put up these barriers. They're like, actually, I have somebody this morning. We worked with some affiliates, and the affiliates will drive traffic to our master classes, right? And one of the affiliate managers asked me, "Hey, would you be willing to talk to some people?" They were asking some questions. I'm like, "Why would I not want to talk with these people?" Right? Yes, of course I'd be willing to talk with these people because that's communication, and this is the business we're in. We're in a business
Yeah.
of communication and helping people to win, and we win at the same time. So absolutely. So if people reach out, we're super responsive on that.
Love it. Okay, Doug, this might be the hardest question, but it's the last one. Who's your favorite rock star?
Oh, wow, that one's really, really hard. My favorite rock star in music or my favorite rock star in business or
How
life?
about music?
I would say my favorite rock star. Oh, it's so like there's like five names coming to my head.
Mhm.
You know, I have a lot of respect for Bon Jovi and what he's done. But I also have like extreme respect for the lead singer of the Scorpions or Billy Joel, or I mean, Billy Joel has had this huge, long-standing career, and man, I went to see him, and he sounded the same as he did and he just loved what he was doing. So that's a really hard. But if I had to pick it, I would probably go with Bon Jovi at this point.
Nice. Love that. Right on. And since you mentioned it, what about in business?
In business, there is a man, his name is Russ Whitney. And I actually worked with Russ. I still work with Russ from time to time. The guy is super brilliant. He owned the majority share of some training companies. One was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Uh-huh.
But he also had, construction company, he had $1 billion worth of companies. I mean, I was the independent president of training and sales for Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes and a bunch of other people, but I learned so much from Russ in a short period of time. It's kind of like when he speaks, I listen. So yeah, he's russwhitney.com. You can find out more about him, but he's a super smart guy.
Wow. Thank you so much for rocking out with me today, Doug. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, same here, Tim. I really appreciate you having me here, and I'm super, super grateful that you took the time to have this conversation.
Awesome. And to the listeners, make sure you go to workathomerockstar.com for more information. We'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar podcast.